The TV has clearly gone through some truly amazing evolutionary changes in the past century, from the primitive tech that used to power our oversized, laminated, veneered, and stained wooden idiot boxes in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, to the introduction of flashy technologies like plasma, LCD, and OLED displays. The television of the past, compared to the TVs of our modern era, hardly even resemble each other. Since we produce a lot of content covering classic TV shows, it seems only natural for us to take a look back at the evolution and development of the TV. The birth of television and consumer anxiety. While there is considerable debate about its origins, the very first mechanical, television-like facsimile machine capable of transmitting moving images was invented by Alexander Bain sometime between 1843 and 1846. Several other engineers continued working on improving Bain's design over the next decade or so, including working models and systems developed by English physicist Frederick Bakewell and Italian priest Giovanni Caselli. The mechanical television showed potential, but it was far too limited, and the technology needed to produce its images was too large and expensive to make it a viable consumer product. Even so, you can't discuss the history of television without at least mentioning the contributions of these long-since dead fellas. Other notable players in early development of television include Leon Theremin, the inventor of the musical instrument that shares his name, and Slovenian nobleman and inventor Anton Kodelj. The invention of the first all-electronic TV system featuring an electronic image pickup device was first invented in 1927 by Philo Farnsworth. The television was initially written off as a rich man's toy. Throughout the 30s and 40s, it was commonly believed it was déclassé or uncouth to have a TV or even watch one. By the end of the 40s, about 2% of American families owned one, and the ones that did were usually trying to hide it. After World War II, however, we saw a big marketing push to bring these devices into our homes. That's around the time that the big radio networks were making the move to TV. If that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be familiar with all those old photos of big furniture-like units that were the conspicuous centerpieces of living rooms everywhere. With a few noteworthy exceptions, like the wonky TV stove, the big idea was that the TV was meant to live in the living room. So the designers of TV sets came up with various styles of units meant to look just like furniture. The TVs of that era had to mesh with the interior design sentiments of the time. They also had to appease the anxiety marketers insisted that women would have about machines in the house. There was a common, pervasive fear that was regularly expressed in the high-end architectural journals of the time that these newfangled televisions would be the bane of interior design. Interiors magazine even ran an entire issue devoted to the TV with the dire warning, "Beware the eye." Modern viewers might assume people were over the moon about the idea of television, but no, people were nervous about placing these picture tube monstrosities into their sacred living rooms. Hide it. This anxiety over the perceived ways TVs were going to conflict with the rest of interior decor led to the need to disguise or conceal the set. This, in turn, led to rather creative and fancy solutions such as the George Nelson storage wall, a piece of furniture that allowed consumers to tuck away the machines of everyday life. The concept of hiding the TV set became an important design trend in the higher-end mid-century approach. Either you hid it by literally tucking it away behind a closed door, cabinet, or movable wall, or you did everything in your power to camouflage it. The fear that the TV would somehow take over the living room led to middle-class women tucking them behind bookshelves and paintings. Apparently, some folks even put them inside of fireplaces, which until then was the primary focal point of the room. Universal adoption changed everything. By 1960, nearly 90% of U.S. homes had a TV, and people were already spending an average of 5 days watching one. That shift was substantially faster than any prior tech adoption. Throughout that decade and into the next one, clever marketing for the television had a significant impact on its almost universal adoption throughout the Western world. In the late 40s and early 50s, the TV had closely resembled the radio cabinets of the day. By the mid-50s, their footprint had become increasingly larger. This was around the time that you began seeing ads that advocated for TVs being used as something akin to a console table. You could plop a vase of flowers or a bowl of fruit on those bad boys and call it a day. Some early TV sets could even hold a large lamp. Before we get to the TV of the late 60s and 70s, check out this ad for the Zenith Space Command remote control. While adopters of the device might have thought of it at the time as being something super futuristic, the TV itself could have easily fit in the Victorian era. Then you had sets that incorporated elaborate faux fixtures like knobs, handles, and keyholes. By the swinging 60s and groovy 70s, the television became a way for people to get away from the family. The TV was no longer just an object of admiration for happy, healthy, wholesome families to sit down and enjoy together, only to feverishly throw a tablecloth over when they were done watching. As the times changed and television content began to be more risque and provocative, so did the marketing and design aesthetics for the actual sets. Ads commonly depicted liberated women and men holding small personal devices while running off to the woods or scuba diving with their televisions. As the price for the TV dropped, the placement of sets also changed. People could afford to put another TV in their bedroom, man cave, or she shed. Not that that phrase had been invented yet, but you get the picture. The 80s, 90s, and 21st century. In the 80s and 90s, the TV adopted a more modern, seemingly higher-tech black box aesthetic. Before this time, people might have been trying to hide them, but suddenly they were a futuristic techno black box that we wanted to put somewhere where we had free space. TVs were popping up in all sorts of places they hadn't before, like bathrooms and kitchens. Then, suddenly everyone was slapping all these fancy new devices to their sets. You had VCRs, Betamax, Laserdisc players, cable boxes, and video game consoles. And with all that new tech, you also had a tangled mess of wires going every which way. So, almost as if nothing had changed, the TV suddenly got shoved back into big furniture like cabinets again. That is, however, until right about 1997 when the first flat screen came along. Today, the TV doesn't seem to match anything in your house, unless your aesthetic is ultra-futuristic postmodern. TVs just look like thin sheets of glass accented with a thin penciling of plastic. Perhaps the biggest design innovation in recent years is using your TV as a faux picture frame or as an extension of your wallpaper. So, once again, we're actively trying to hide the things. Nothing's changed. Now it's time to hear from you. Which one of the classic TV sets from yesteryear do you remember? Let us know in the comment section below.